This set of slides is on non-market related exposures. So non-market related exposures are liability noise. They're factors that we make assumptions about within the participants in the pension plan, for example. So liability noise is where uncertainty in non-market related exposures, and they can include model uncertainty, where probabilities are not certain, and an example of that might be the mortality rate change due to medical innovations, we're living longer, and assumptions underlying actuary models are uncertain. And if the probabilities underlying the actuary's models are certain, the main factor that drives liability noise is the number of participants. Statistical methods can be used to estimate this component of the noise. The larger the population, the more closely experience will track the model. But by its nature, model uncertainty is hard to estimate. The extent and causes of the liability noise vary greatly by demographic groups, i.e. between active and inactive participants. So for inactive participants, our retirees, liability noise is attributable to the assumption about the length of people's lives and hence the duration they will be receiving the benefits. Because there are no liquid assets whose cash flows are linked with mortality, thus mortality exposure is difficult to hedge. However, there are products like bonds in an index being developed in the US that are linked to life expectancy. There is also uncertainty regarding the timing and amounts of benefits, depending on when the participant will retire and start receiving benefits. And for our active participants, those current employees, in addition to the mortality assumption, active employees' estimated benefit payments are embedded with assumptions of withdrawal, disability, and retirement, and therefore are embedded with a large amount of uncertainty, much more so than those of retirees or deferreds. The estimated benefit payments for an employee who is merely years away from retirement are based on a long string of probabilities and represent the actuary's best estimate regarding the plan's future obligation. Although we cannot hedge the noise, the greater the relative size of liability noise, the less hedgeable the liability. So linking assets and liabilities via fundamental factors. The cornerstone liability mimicking assets are a combination of nominal bonds, real rate bonds, and equities. The appropriate combination can be determined by factor modeling using a factor covariance matrix and asset and liability sensitivities. The liability factors are the accrued benefit liability, which we need the proxies of the real rate, inflation, and the nominal bond premium. Future wage liability, it's economic growth and equity growth. And for inflation indexation, we need the real rate bond premium. We are now ready to model. So we determine the factors involved. The CAPM holds that an asset's fair return, their expected return, entails the risk-free rate of return as a compensation for consumption deferral, plus a risk premium commensurate with the asset's risk. Further, the risk-free rate can be disaggregated into the compensation with inflation and the real risk-free rate of return. In practice, inflation is proxied by the change of the consumer price index, and the real risk-free rate is proxied by the Treasury bill return minus the inflation proxy. With regard to the risk premium, historical analysis combined with forward-looking adjustment helps to determine the risk premium as the difference between the asset's total return and the risk-free rate. Further, with regard to growth, we believe in a long-term relationship between the overall economy and the stock market. And this table shows the factor covariance matrix. So we have the real rate, proxy, standard deviation of 80.8%, and its covariance relationship with itself is 1, of course, and we'll see 1 down the diagonal. And its covariance with growth is 0.2, with equities 0.10, equity premium 0.05, and real bonds premium 0.05, etc. So we'll have all our proxies and their covariance relationship with each of the other assets.